Senator Young, thank you for joining us today. First of all, I wanted to talk with you about what your top priority is in terms of housing infrastructure as this legislative session winds down.
Well, one of the great things is that we were able to accomplish a great deal during the state budget process, and we were able to restore a lot of the crucial housing programs, such as the Neighborhood Preservation Program, the Rural Preservation Program, and those, especially the Rural Preservation Program, may be the only game in town in some of our rural regions, and they do tremendous work as far as developing affordable housing, revitalizing main streets, downtowns, and doing other economic development projects. That really there's no one else to handle those, and every year it seems like they may get cut in the governor's budget, and the legislature is fully committed to restoring those funds. And so we were able to do that this year. But there are so many different housing programs that were included in the budget. And that's really appropriate when you think about it, because a lot of the housing programs have to do with state funding. So we want to make sure that we're handling things properly. And another area that I'm very, very enthused about has to do with the Main Street program. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all, but the Main Street program is really popular upstate. It actually works on revitalizing downtowns, and we all know the downtowns traditionally have been the hearts and souls of our communities, but as they've had to compete with some of the larger department stores, malls, big box stores that get located far away from downtown, some of our downtowns have seen hard times. And so the Main Street program revitalizes downtowns. And I can tell you in a second, if you want. I don't want to talk too long myself, but I can tell you in a second some of the success stories that we've had, even in my district, but across upstate.
Sure. What's an example of one of those success stories?
Well, I'm very proud that I represent this town of Mount Morris, and that's in Livingston County. And Mount Morris is somewhere that is special to my heart. I grew up in Avon, about 15 miles away. And when I was a little girl, I remember Mount Morris being this bustling little center of commerce. And as the years progressed, they fell in hard times. And when you looked at it, there were these beautiful historic buildings, as we see in so many of our downtowns across upstate. But they were vacant, they were falling apart, small businesses had left. And so it really was turning into a blighted area. We were able to pass legislation in the Senate and the Assembly, and the governor signed, that would allow for incentive programs through tax rebate programs that would really incentivize development. And we were very fortunate because that development happened in Mount Morris. And now when you drive through it, these beautiful historic buildings are fully restored. We have small businesses moving back in. In fact, almost all the storefronts are full now, and that generates sales tax revenue for the county and the locality. And so it's a very positive way to transform a downtown. Main Street funds are grants that are provided through the state budget that help downtowns across the state. So that's a very important area that I focus on. Another legislation related to downtown has to do with the Rural Urban Fund that we established last year, and we're able to add more money to that this year. That again is funding that incentivizes development, and it's for mixed use. And what I mean by mixed use is that it can be commercial on the bottom, for example, and housing on the top. Think about downtowns. That's traditionally how they were set up. And when you have the housing component, you're able to have consumers that live right there, that are going to go to the coffee shops, that are going to go to the small businesses located on the main street. So it's a really great program, and we've seen great success.
In recent times, the state has placed more of a focus on upstate economic development, but do you feel that there's been enough focus on specifically this downtown development, this Main Street development, especially in these smaller cities and towns?
We're working very hard on that. I also chair the Rural Resources Commission, which is almost like a mini think tank. It's devoted to developing good policy to advance issues in rural areas, and it's everything from transportation to housing to economic development to agriculture to healthcare, which is always a challenging issue in rural areas and having access. And so I work on all those different components, And it's great to have that marriage of housing. And you're right, a lot of times we think of housing issues as strictly New York City because affordable housing is always on people's minds there. The cost of living is really great, as we all know. And so we focus on policies that help New York City, but there are a lot of housing needs upstate. We're a very historic state, and that's one of the great things about us. But that means we're also a very old state. We're one of the first states that was settled, and our infrastructure is old. And you might be surprised to know this, but actually the oldest housing stock, not only in the state, but the entire country, is in my district. And that creates a lot of challenges. We may have seniors, for example, living in homes that need repairs, and that's why the state has great programs such as the weatherization program to help seniors and other people who can't afford to make those repairs. We have this Restore program that helps seniors, and we all know that the property taxes are very high in New York State, and we've done things to reverse that, such as the 2% property tax cap. We have the new property tax rebate program this year, but seniors oftentimes have a difficult time staying in their homes, being able to afford it. And so we have programs to help seniors. We have programs such as Sunny May that helps first-time home buyers to be able to afford to buy a home, have a mortgage, and that makes a difference for so many people just starting out with their families and their careers. And so there's a whole array of housing programs that maybe we don't talk about enough, but they certainly are really important to upstate, to our quality of life, to create opportunities, and also they're important to our economic growth.
You talked a little bit about legislation so far, but is there anything specifically that you're trying to get pushed through the Senate right now, or that has already been moved through the Senate and you're waiting to get passed in the Assembly at the moment?
You know what, there's a couple of things. One is a program that I'm looking to establish that's near and dear to my heart, and it's called Homes for Heroes. Right now the state has a program that's very popular called Access to Home, and it helps people with disabilities or seniors who may have some kind of disability. Maybe they need a wheelchair ramp, for example, and they may not be able to afford to make those necessary modifications to their houses or their apartments. And so Access to Home has been a really effective program in helping people. But we want to do something, Homes for Heroes, that would help especially our returning veterans who are coming home from war. And I personally know so many people who are coming back. They may be missing legs, arms. They may have traumatic brain injury. I can think of one, for example, James Hackemer from Gowanda, who came home. He was missing both his legs. He had a traumatic brain injury, was in a coma for more than a month. And he came home to his parents' home, and they needed to make modifications to their home. Tragically, James subsequently died in an accident, but he kind of typifies veterans who are returning, and they need our help. They deserve our thanks for what they've done on behalf of us and our freedom and our country. I think it's the least that we can do. So we're looking to establish this program out of the $314 million from the settlement from J.P. Morgan, and I think it would be a great investment. Also would help a lot of our aging veterans, people who served in World War II, and as you know, they're getting quite elderly, Vietnam and the Korean War, and they're developing now maybe age-related disabilities, and they need our help too.
Sure. Senator Young, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.